The tension in the studio was thick even before the cameras rolled. It was a global summit, aired live across 42 countries, where world leaders gathered to discuss peace, trade, and justice. Everyone was dressed in their finest. But behind the smiles, the air was heavy. President Ibrahim Traoré, calm and sharp in his military uniform, was seated quietly near the center of the stage. He wasn't there for drama. He was there to speak about Africa, its hunger, strength, and stolen future. Then, without warning, Donald Trump entered the studio. Cameras turned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Trump wasn't even scheduled to speak yet. He didn't shake hands, didn't sit. He just walked right up and pointed directly at Traoré. "Who let him in?" Trump barked. "Why is he even on this stage?" Gasps filled the room. The moderator froze, and Ibrahim, he didn't flinch. He just turned his head and calmly looked Trump in the eye. The room held its breath. Live TV. Millions watching. A global insult had just been made, and nobody knew what would happen next. Cameras zoomed in. All eyes were on Ibrahim. The studio lights flickered slightly, like they, too, were afraid of what was coming. Trump stood tall, his voice loud. "This is America's summit. We don't need lectures from tiny countries with no power." Some guests turned their faces. A few whispered, "Did he just say that?" Ibrahim slowly stood up, not in anger, not in fear, but with dignity. He stepped forward and said, softly, clearly, in perfect English, "Burkina Faso may be small in size, but we're giants in courage." A quiet clap began from a journalist in the back row, then another. But before it could build, Trump shouted, "Sit down! You're not here to speak. You're here to listen." Silence, the kind that chokes. Ibrahim's eyes didn't move. He didn't sit. He simply said, "The world is listening to the wrong voices. That ends today." That's when Maxine Waters, who had remained silent until now, slowly removed her earpiece. Her face said one thing: enough. She stood. The energy in the room shifted. Something unforgettable was coming. Maxine Waters didn't yell. She didn't storm. She stood with the calm of a woman who had fought too many battles to be shaken by one more man yelling. The audience leaned forward. Even the cameramen were trembling. They knew what was about to happen would become history. She looked directly at Trump and said, "This man right here, he's a president. And he earned that title not with money, but with the love of his people. You will not shame him on this stage." Trump scoffed. "Don't lecture me, Maxine. You're always loud but never right." Maxine took one step forward, pointing a single finger. Her voice broke through the studio like thunder. "The only thing louder than me today, Mr. Trump, will be the sound of the world realizing you're afraid of truth." The crowd erupted. For the first time in minutes, Ibrahim smiled, not out of pride, but out of quiet gratitude. Maxine turned to him, nodded, and said gently, "Speak, Mr. President. Let the world finally hear Africa's voice." It was his moment now, and nothing, not even Trump, could stop what was coming next. As the crowd clapped for Maxine, Ibrahim Traoré stood quietly behind the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He just spoke. His first words, "I didn't come here to defend myself. I came here to defend a boy who died holding a stick because he couldn't afford a school book." The studio froze. Even Trump sat still. Ibrahim continued, his voice steady. He was 9. His name was Jules. He walked 6 kilometers every day to reach a school with no roof. One day, he didn't make it. A collapsed bridge took him. Gasps rippled across the stage. Maxine lowered her head. Ibrahim paused, fighting tears. He died trying to reach education, something kids in the West take for granted. There was a stillness now, a sacred silence. Then he looked up and said something that broke hearts. When I signed my first military oath, I didn't do it to lead. I did it so boys like Jules could live to read. The room was silent. No one blinked, and no one was ready for what he was about to reveal next. Ibrahim looked down at his notes, then pushed them aside. "I don't need these," he said. "The truth doesn't need a script." He told them about Compiègne, a remote region in Burkina Faso where kids eat once a day, if they're lucky, where hospitals are hours away and roads vanish when it rains. Then came the chilling detail. That bridge Jules died on, it was promised to be rebuilt 5 times. Each time, the aid was sent, but it never reached us. A journalist from France looked stunned. "Where did the aid go?" she asked aloud. Ibrahim looked at her, his face calm but firm. "Ask your government. Ask the corporations. Ask those who take our gold and return nothing but broken promises." A quiet sob came from somewhere in the audience. A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. Trump muttered something under his breath, but nobody listened. The room was locked into Ibrahim. Then he said, "Jules isn't the only child who died waiting. He's just the one who haunts me the most." He glanced at the ceiling. "And if telling his story costs me your respect, then so be it." The camera zoomed in on his face. He was shaking, but not in fear, in pain. Maxine Waters was silent. She'd been listening like the rest of the world, eyes wide, jaw clenched. When Ibrahim finished, she stepped to the mic again. But this time she didn't raise her voice. She cried, one tear, then another. "I've served in Congress for over 30 years, she said softly. "But I've never seen a leader stand in front of the world and speak like that." Trump scoffed again. "It's a pity party." That was it. Maxine turned slowly toward him. Her voice was trembling now, not from fear, but from rage buried deep in her bones. "You mock pain because you've never had to feel it." Trump opened his mouth. She cut him off. "You build towers. He builds bridges. Don't ever speak his name again unless you're ready to walk the roads he has." There was thunder in her words, not volume, but weight. Ibrahim stood still, hands behind his back. And then the crowd stood with him, one by one. Even diplomats from countries that had once mocked him. And suddenly, the summit wasn't about Trump anymore. It was about truth. And the truth had just taken the mic. Ibrahim paused. The lights dimmed slightly, not by design, but as if the studio itself was grieving. He took a breath and said, "When I went to see Jules's mother, she didn't say a single word. She just handed me his shoes." The audience gasped. Some of them had tears in their eyes. "She had washed them," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. Tiny red rubber shoes with holes in them, still wet, still muddy from the river. Even Maxine covered her mouth. Trump looked restless, but no one cared. "She placed them in my hands," Ibrahim continued, and then she turned around. She hasn't spoken since that day, not to her neighbors, not even to herself. The camera zoomed in. His eyes were glassy, but he didn't cry. He held up the shoes, slowly pulling them from his jacket pocket. Real shoes, on live TV. Gasps echoed. A journalist sobbed openly. Ibrahim looked up and whispered, "Every time I walk into a meeting where we're called poor, lazy, or corrupt, I think of these shoes, and I remember why I fight." Trump leaned forward. He'd had enough. "This is manipulation," he snapped. "This isn't politics, it's theater. I came here to talk trade, not be guilt-tripped by a sob story from the bush." The crowd turned. Anger filled the room like smoke. Maxine stepped forward, but Ibrahim gently raised a hand to stop her. He wanted to speak. Alone. He walked up to Trump, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to be seen. "You call it a sob story, but it's not a story. It's our lives, our losses, our dead. Trump laughed bitterly. You want sympathy? Go write a book. That's when something remarkable happened. A woman from the UK delegation stood up, then a delegate from Brazil, then Canada, then South Africa. One by one, global leaders rose. They didn't speak. They just stood. Not for politics, not for performance, but for pain. The moderator whispered into her headset, "We're witnessing something historic." And back at home, millions of viewers, many who had never heard of Ibrahim Traoré before, were crying. Crying for Jules, crying for justice, crying for something real. And still, Ibrahim wasn't done. The silence stretched for almost 10 seconds before Ibrahim spoke again. When I became president, he said, I gave up many things: comfort, privacy, sleep. He took a long breath. But I also gave up my salary. The room blinked. What? I refused to be paid while children starved. Instead, we redirected the money to build a school in Jules' village. The camera cut to a picture on the screen behind him. A one-room classroom, red earth walls, tin roof, no air conditioning. But children were smiling, books in their hands. I didn't build it to look nice on television, he said. I built it so no child there has to die crossing a broken bridge. Another image appeared. A tiny wooden bridge, hand-carved by villagers, sturdy but imperfect. A sign read, Pont Jules, le garçon qui voulait apprendre. Jules' bridge, the boy who wanted to learn. The studio went quiet. Then a little girl's voice came through the speaker. A video message. She said, Merci, Président. Ibrahim bowed his head, not out of pride, but out of love. The room was breaking, and hearts were too. The footage of Ibrahim holding the shoes and speaking about Jules was replayed over 74 million times in 24 hours. It aired on screens from Tokyo to Lagos, from London to Nairobi. Even CNN called it the most important moment of the decade. But what happened next? No one saw coming. In Ouagadougou, thousands of Burkina Faso youth poured into the streets, not to riot, but to march in silence, holding signs that read, We are Jules. Our voices are not small. Our president speaks for us all. On social media, the hashtag #BridgeForJules began trending globally. Meanwhile, in Washington, White House officials were panicking. A leaked email from a senior advisor read, Traoré is making us look heartless. Do we issue a statement or let it die down? But it wasn't dying down, because in Ghana, a teenage girl recorded a video saying, I used to dream of being Beyoncé. Now I dream of being like Ibrahim Traoré. And just like that, he became more than a president. He became hope. Back in the summit studio, Ibrahim was quietly packing his folder. He had said what he came to say. The moderator asked gently, Mr. President, would you like to stay for the closing session? He smiled and replied, I've spoken enough. Now I want to listen. As he walked off stage, a producer handed him a phone. There's someone on the line. Says he needs to speak to you immediately. Ibrahim looked confused, but he took the call. Hello? The voice on the other end was slow, uncertain. President Traoré, this is Senator John McCaffrey, Republican. I watched your speech. I don't agree with everything you said, but I cried. I just wanted to say that. Ibrahim didn't speak at first. Then he said softly, Thank you for listening. McCaffrey continued, his voice cracking. If you ever come back to America, I'd like my grandchildren to meet you. Traoré paused. Only if I get to hear their dreams. That moment wasn't captured on camera, but it didn't need to be, because some of the most powerful shifts in the world happen off stage. It was the final hour of the summit. Delegates were taking their seats. Cameras were still rolling. But one chair was empty, Trump's. An aide whispered something to the moderator. A moment later, the news spread. Trump had left the building, quietly, without saying goodbye. People were stunned. Was it shame? Rage? Embarrassment? No one knew. But what they did know was this: the moment had slipped away from him. The spotlight was no longer his. A reporter from Germany tweeted, "For the first time, Trump was not the loudest voice in the room. He was silent." Meanwhile, Ibrahim sat in the back row, listening, taking notes, nodding at others' speeches. When a South African diplomat praised Burkina Faso's literacy program, Ibrahim smiled, but said nothing. He didn't need to, because now the world was echoing his words. Maxine walked past him, gently touching his shoulder. "History has a new name," she whispered. He looked up and replied, "Not mine, Jules's." And at that moment, somewhere in the world, another child decided to dream. Across the Atlantic, the White House press briefing room was buzzing. A spokesperson walked up to the podium, eyes darting between reporters. He looked shaken. This wasn't going to be a normal briefing. He cleared his throat. "We are aware of President Traoré's remarks during the global summit. The president," he paused, "has no further comment at this time." A reporter from MSNBC stood up. "Are you saying President Trump left because he was embarrassed?" Silence. Another question. "Will the U.S. contribute to rebuilding the infrastructure in Burkina Faso, especially the bridge that led to the death of a child?" More silence. Finally, a voice from the back. "His name was Jules." The spokesperson froze. That wasn't in his notes, but it was in everyone's heart now. He slowly stepped away from the podium. For the first time in recent history, a White House press conference ended with no answers, just silence. And across social media, the message was clear. The world wasn't forgetting. Because Ibrahim Traoré hadn't just spoken, he had planted a seed. Back in Burkina Faso, a miracle happened. Jules' mother, who hadn't spoken a word in almost a year, asked for a radio, not to listen, but to speak. "I want to talk to the world," she whispered. Local journalists gathered at her small clay home. She sat on a stool, barefoot, holding her son's shoes in her lap. Her voice was quiet, shaky, but it carried the weight of a nation. "I thought I lost my son forever. But now, the world knows his name. The world says his name." A child in the village wiped her tears with a school book. The mother continued, "Tell President Traoré. I heard him. I heard him louder than anyone else in that room, and I am no longer silent." The broadcast reached millions. Even BBC broke its schedule to play it in full. CNN's Anderson Cooper couldn't finish his segment. He had to pause mid-sentence, visibly fighting tears. "Sometimes," he said, "a mother's voice changes more than all the politics in the world." And across every screen, across every language, people cried. For Jules, for his mother, and for the leader who made the world listen. The next morning, the summit resumed. But the tone had changed. There was no applause, no smiles, just a quiet reverence. Ibrahim sat in the second row. He hadn't spoken since his testimony. He didn't need to. One by one, leaders from other nations stood up and pledged action. Japan, $3 million toward rural schools in Burkina Faso. Canada, engineering teams to assess and repair the Compiègne bridges. Germany, a joint literacy program across the Sahel. But what stunned everyone was when France stood up. A minister, previously silent, said, "We owe Burkina Faso more than aid. We owe them accountability." There was a long pause. Then softly, "We were part of the problem. Now we want to be part of the healing." That line was replayed around the world, and for the first time President Ibrahim Traoré smiled. Not the smile of victory, but of relief. Still, he knew this wasn't the end. There was one more message he needed to share. A message for every forgotten child, a message that would break the internet and bind the world. The summit was about to close. The moderator took the mic, unsure of what to say after such a heavy 3 days. The world had changed before their eyes. Then she paused. Before we end, President Ibrahim Traoré has requested 2 minutes. The entire room stood, not out of protocol, but respect. Ibrahim walked slowly to the stage, no paper in hand, no screens behind him. He looked into the camera, the global audience, and said, "I'm not speaking today as a president. I'm speaking as a son, a brother, a man who was once a boy walking barefoot to school." He held up Jules's shoes one last time. These were the shoes of a child who died trying to learn, a child this world never cared about, until now. He raised his voice, not in anger, but in hope. "We don't need your pity. We need your partnership. We need your honesty. And above all, we need your ears." There was not a dry eye in the room, because what he said next would be remembered forever. Ibrahim held up one hand, like a teacher quieting a room full of children. "Listen," he said. "Can you hear it?" The audience blinked, confused. He closed his eyes. That's the sound of children studying. That's the sound of mothers laughing again. That's the sound of hope returning. Then his voice broke, but he didn't stop. Jules was not a symbol. He was a child, just like your children. His blood was red. His dreams were big. And he had one simple wish: to be seen. A world leader from Switzerland stood up and wept. A Saudi journalist took off her headset and wiped her tears. Even commentators back in the US choked up on air. Then Ibrahim said the last words of the summit. "The future does not belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who listen the deepest." A silence fell over the room, not empty, but full of meaning, full of memory. And just like that, he stepped down. The applause that followed, it wasn't loud. It was slow, rising, endless, and pure. A month later, a drone flew over Compiègne. Where a dirt path once led to danger, now stood a strong, modern bridge. The sign read, "Pont Jules," in memory of the boy who opened the world's eyes. Children ran across it laughing, girls with books, boys with pencils. CNN aired a short film called "The Shoes That Changed History." Netflix requested a docuseries, but Ibrahim declined. This isn't for profit, this is for people. At the UN, Maxine Waters introduced a new bill named Jules Law, a global initiative to audit and redirect blocked foreign aid. And across the world, something extraordinary happened. More people began listening. Jules's mother now spoke at schools, quiet, gentle, and proud. In her first public speech, she said, "My son never got to learn, but because of him, millions now will." If you watched until this moment, thank you, truly. This story isn't just about politics. It's about people. It's about listening. It's about children like Jules who never get the microphone. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Share it so others hear what the media won't say loud enough. Drop a comment, say, "We hear you, Jules," or share how this story made you feel. And if you believe in real stories that matter, please subscribe now. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning, and the next voice we amplify could be yours.